Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learning to Turn with me, Gouge. We are in the middle of hollowing out the bowls. In the last episode, we used the 40-40 bowl gouge to clear the first 2/3 of the bowl. This time we'll be switching to what's called the bottom bowl gouge, which has a much shallower angle on the bevel. It's 60 degrees. The 40-40 bowl gouge, of course, is 40 degrees. It also has virtually no wing. The wings are not swept back. In fact, I may need to work on this and bring it back a little bit. These are pretty much 90. I think I wanted to be about 80, 85. Hadn't really noticed that before. Watching Stuart do this, it seems like it's a simpler operation than the push cuts to shape the outside or to clear the first 2/3 with a 40-40 bowl gouge. But I'll see. I suspect it's going to be a little tougher than it looks. It looks, I think, deceptively easy. What makes it look so simple is it's only really moving in one dimension, whereas the push cut you're having to both push and sweep. Here it's almost entirely sweep, very little pushing into the wood to go deeper, I think. We'll see. Again, I think this is deceptively simple looking and might be a little tougher to get a good handle on. But let's get into the particulars before we go any farther with the technique. Since it's a curved cut, again, it's right foot forward, standing off to the side a little bit here, not in front of the piece. Left hand is going to be on top, and I'll talk more about that in the technique section, because as always, the left hand is deceptively hard to get right, I think. The tool, of course, I've already said, is the bottom bowl gouge. The tool rest is going to be as close as I can get it to the top of the bowl. We're dealing with more overhang than we have before, so you want to get the tool rest as close as possible to minimize the amount of overhang. Farther the tool goes over the rest, the more chatter there is, more flexing of the metal and so forth, more leverage. So I'll be right up close to the edge once I get rid of the proud part at the center there. Let's see, vertical position is a little bit more pronounced than usual. Normally we're around 10 degrees. This time it's going to be closer to 15. If I can do that, and you'll remember before with one of the cuts, I was running into the bed, and that was keeping me from getting the tool angle as low as I would have liked. So I may have to just kind of go with what this particular lathe will let me do. On the horizontal angle, we'll get into that more in the technique section, because it's changing throughout the cut. The flute angle is more open than for any other cut, except for possibly the roughing out of a spindle that we showed just for purposes of safety, comparing how you can handle a tool with side grain versus end grain. And for this one, it's about 1 o'clock, so almost completely open, whereas generally we're working in the 2 to 3 o'clock or 9:30, 10 o'clock. All right, that covers it for the particulars. Back to technique. So this will take two somewhat different operations. The first cut into here with the bowl gouge is going to leave pretty deep ridges where each cut stalled out. And I need to remove those first to have a flat surface to really start doing finer work with. So the first few cuts will be a rather limited sweep of the tool, starting at about 90 degrees and just going in smaller bites, working my way through those big ridges. Once I've gotten it smoothed out, at that point it will be rather pronounced, going from anywhere from 20 degrees, 30 degrees past, so what would that be, 70 degrees to 60 degrees in your direction, and bringing the tool all the way back to about the same angle the other way, 20 to 30 degrees this side of 90, so 60, 70 degrees on my side. So that's a pretty big sweep. And throughout that, I need to keep my hand on top of the tool and just providing pressure downwards. Apparently one of the real risks or tendencies here is to want to push the tool because it has such a light, blunt angle on it. You feel like you need to get the left hand into the game to get it to move. We don't want to do that. So I want to be careful and keep the left thumb even on top so that it's not behind here and operating as something I can fulcrum against. And as I'm getting towards the center of the bowl, I need to slow down the tool speed because even though the RPMs, of course, are constant, as you get closer to the center of the bowl, the actual feet per second moving past the cutting edge is reducing to almost zero at the very center of the bowl. So I'll have to figure out how to get the pacing just right to keep cutting nicely as I get towards the center. I think that about covers it. So let's get the wings drawn back on this thing at least a few degrees and then fire up the lathe. Talk to you on the other side. Well, this is off to an inauspicious start even before I've made the first cut. Left hand is not on top as it's supposed to be. I guess this is just the first couple of cuts. Getting the nub out of the middle there, but still, I don't know any reason that I should be using a different grip. Also, the flute is far more closed than it should be. At least it was there in that first cut. And there, I remember where my hand's supposed to be. Flute is now at about 1 o'clock or so. The problem I had with this right out of the gate, apart from hand position, was trusting the bevel and trusting that simply applying force straight down the shaft with my right hand was going to feed the tool the way that it's supposed to. So I'm not positive, but I think I'm probably using my left hand some to force the tool. Another thing you'll probably notice is it fairly frequently I have the tool kick back to the left. And at some point in here I figure out what's going on, which is I'm getting what I believe is called a leverage catch of sorts. I think there's two kinds that are known as leverage catches. One is overhang over the tool rest, and that overhang is greater than the leverage you have, and the tool gets drawn down. The other is with a tool that has a rounded bottom, which all bowl gouges do. You need to make sure that the part of the tool that is cutting is directly in line with the part that is on the tool rest. If you touch the wood with a part of the gouge that's off to one side or the other, normally to the right, but I'm sure you can find a way to do it with the tool on the left as well, then the tool is going to want to torque because the point that's making contact with the wood is not directly supported on the tool rest. And that's something I think I was having happen repeatedly here, in part because I'm not clearing the wood in the center first. So we're kind of past that point with this bowl, but we'll see it again soon enough. That you have all those ridges that were left by hollowing with the 40/40 gouge. And what I've learned, I'm not sure if I learned this in the process of this series of bowls, but I've definitely gotten a handle on it better since, is to start at the center and work those down progressively, working your way out towards the outside, so that the center is always a bit lower, or at least not higher than where you're starting, because you'll inevitably run into a place where you're starting to work uphill into that, and that's where it's really easy to have the wing of this, the right wing of this gouge, end up grabbing the wood and torquing it to I guess clockwise, and in the process I think it ends up also causing it to skate back to the left. It's kind of unnerving when that happens. You really feel like you don't have any control at all. Here you see me starting, I've already removed most of the wood I want to, and I'm starting to really move the tool handle far away from myself to get the angle I need to start trying to blend in with the real side of the bowl, like there. And that's where you do need to grab the tool to hold it firmly as you're first getting the cut started. But I should not have my thumb behind the gouge as I do there. As I said in the intro, that ends up functioning as a fulcrum for levering the tool around rather than just letting the bevel feed it. Not getting very good curls here, lots of chips. Once again, this is the older, dry oak, and I don't think maybe if I was way better, I'd be getting some nice curls off of there, but it certainly doesn't lend itself to those picturesque shavings. There, I'm coming into the center, and that's a problem area to get just right. Here, I think you can see I've left a bump or a nub there, which is just a little bit of that rise I was talking about before that you end up coming into. And even that little bit is enough to grab the wing of the tool. But we'll see on some of these that I make the opposite mistake and end up more or less drilling a hole towards the center, just quarter inch, maybe eighth of an inch deeper than elsewhere, and it's just not. There's Bounder. It's just not what you want. You want your bottom of your bowl to be maybe gradually cupped a bit, but not that divot in the middle. So I just kicked it into high gear here, a little faster than usual and earlier than usual. Normally I wait until the end of the first blank before we go turbo speed, but this episode's already running long, and I've decided I needed to shorten it up a bit. So that does it for blank number one. Nothing too dramatic there. Definitely not the smoothest technique, but got the job done and reasonably decent results. Here, still have my thumb on the back side. There, I finally figured out. Remember how it's supposed to be. And saw me taking the center down there, so I don't have that to run into as much. Still a little bit higher. Should have taken it a bit more. See kind of the moderate sweep of the tool there. Not it's going to get more here as we right there as we pick up the angle of the side and start a smooth cut to blend this side and bottom. I've heard that called the dead man's corner. It definitely is the trickiest part of the inside to get right. Blank number 2 here is olive wood, and right off the bat you can see that it's producing much nicer looking shavings. I'm sure that's largely due to it being not nearly as dry. It was plenty dry to be turning, but not nearly as dry as that 15 or more year oak firewood that the other pieces are. But yeah, this olive was, by comparison, a real pleasure to turn. From the overhead view here, you could see my feet. Just say that just as we switch. But if you happen to notice, my left foot was marginally behind the right, but not nearly as pronounced as it should be for a curved cut that is supposed to be right foot forward. Yeah, it was right foot forward, but I'm really exaggerating that now. It makes for a much better weight transfer as I'm doing this curved cut with the tool really moving. A big sweep. Yeah, not as thin as I might like. It's maybe a 1/4 inch, which is a bit beefy for a bowl that size. It's maybe 5.5, 6 inches across. But this wood did have some cracks in it. You can see there's some tool marks there that are not great, but they're sandable. And nice and close up for this one. And again, I see I'm starting a little too far out there. It didn't take me long to realize I should be working more towards the center, but it's just way easier to take those ridges down towards the middle first and then work your way out. The tool's always moving towards center. Oh, there was a big kick where the tool jumped to the outside. But, I'm always cutting towards center, but, start towards the inside and work that down, and then move progressively farther out for the start of each cut. I don't recall how much I improved during the course. Oh yeah, look at those kicks. How much I improved during the course of this run of bowls, but this is a tool that I've gotten far more comfortable with over the last few months. I was just re-watching one of Stuart's videos, and he was talking about a bevel angle of 50 to 55 degrees. I have this one cut at 60. Now, he did say that he sometimes goes as blunt, if you will, as 60 degrees. But I think I'll give it a try with 50, 55 degrees and just see how I like it. Sounds like he actually changes the profile of his depending on the depth of the bowl, how close he needs to be able to get to the edge. So it's kind of a moving target for him. I should take that nub down at the center. That's high enough to cause me problems. It's fairly easy to just put the tool right on there, and it almost works like a drill bit. It'll just shave that straight down if you get it set on there just right. And once again, starting to increase the swing, starting farther out. And when you get it right and just kind of follow that shape, it does a real nice job cutting, and takes off much more wood than I would have expected. Not that I knew enough to have have real well-grounded expectations, but somehow I thought this tool was not going to be removing nearly as much wood as it proves capable of doing. It's not quite like the 40/40 bowl gouge, taking a 5/8 inch bite out with each pass, but I'm easily getting 3/16, maybe as much as a 1/4 inch on my better passes with it. Yeah, I'm being impatient here. I'm kind of forcing it, and should just kind of set the tool and trust the bevel and apply that light pressure, 2-3 pounds of pressure straight down the shaft, and let the tool feed. Give it time. And I think it looks to me like I'm forcing the tool using my left hand a bit in there and getting some tool movement. This is not what you're looking for. One thing you may notice from the angle we just left, the low side angle, is that I don't have the tool angle as steep as it should be. You'll recall in the intro I specified at least 10, maybe 15 degrees, and I'm holding it darn near flat. It's working for me pretty well, and honestly it's something I still do. I still have not learned to get the tool at what I know to be the right angle. As I understand it, what I should be doing is starting with the tool angle high and making most of the pass with that higher angle, and then as I approach center, then flatten out so that you're bringing the tool down to the center of the bowl to finish off the cut. And I'm remaining fairly flat throughout the whole sweep of the tool. I do a little bit of that, but just not nearly as pronounced as it should be. Here I'm switching. I didn't really mean to leave this in for this segment, but I've switched back to my regular bowl gouge to thin the side a little bit. And I find I do this quite a bit. Once I've gotten the bottom down to about where I want it, then I often will switch to the bowl gouge to thin the side a little bit before making the final pass, as I'm doing here with the bottom bowl gouge. That's because if I didn't get the side as thin as I wanted, you need to make that cut before you can do the final cuts with the bottom bowl gouge, or else I don't think you'd be able to really blend the two cuts together very well. One thing you may notice me doing periodically, the bottom bowl gouge tends to, the shavings from it tend to collect inside the bowl, inside the lip of the bowl, and you can use the tool, kind of just draw it up against the side of the bowl. Don't even need to make contact. In fact, you probably don't want to, but it will collect those shavings and they'll come flying out, clear your vision and whatnot. We're on to blank number 5 here, and I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of this. I think you'll see that the tool is moving more smoothly, getting a nice arc out of it. It's not jumping back on me nearly as much. Basically, I've learned to trust the bevel and just give it that straight down the tool push with the right hand that feeds the tool into the wood, and the swing that follows the cut and gives you the curve for the bottom of the bowl. And only took 4 first tries of frustration and tentativeness and getting things wrong before I started to get the feel for this one. even after this whole pass of, I forget how many we have, probably around 18 blanks here, even after I had completed these, this still remained the tool I was probably least comfortable with. But that said, I think I made decent progress in going from being completely ignorant of how to use it, at least any kind of experience doing what I had seen Stuart do, to feeling like I could accomplish what I was supposed to, even if I felt a little uncertain doing it. On to blank number 6 here, and again, you see some good shavings coming off of there, piling up right into the tool rest after just a couple passes. I was beginning to feel pretty good about it right about now. Kind of fun to watch the shavings pile up at high speed there. Obviously not. Yeah, that's where I don't know if you had a chance to see that. I was just cleaning up the lip of the bowl a little bit, and it caught an edge and tore a chunk out of the side of the bowl. It might tell you a little something that I didn't slow down to show you that. That we have some excitement coming up, and I couldn't afford to spend time just to show that stupid little mistake. Blank number 7 now, and really cooking along. It's almost addictive when you start feeling like you're riding that bevel the way it's meant to be done. And it came back to haunt me here because I got a little too caught up in how smoothly I was cutting, and let's make another pass. And this was the result. And somehow I did not have the camera rolling, either camera rolling, when that happened. You can see the small circular piece in the middle. That was the piece in the jaws, and it remained in the jaws, but I had cut right down to the jaws, and there was nothing left connecting the bowl to that tenon. And it blew apart. Looking at 6 pieces there, and there were a couple pieces missing, so it blowed up real good. And I felt bad enough that I'd blown up a bowl, but I felt even worse when I realized that I didn't have my cameras rolling. I promised you at the outset that I wasn't going to sugarcoat anything here and show you the big mistakes, and that one got away. But I don't feel too bad. Without giving too much away, I think I have some more excitement for you coming up before too long. But yeah, I think that was maybe the first time that I really got bit by the mistake I made back in, what was it, episode 3 or 4, making the tenon, when I made the tenons thicker than they needed to be, meaning I was cutting down into the bottom, and then when I made the mistake and made them too small, and then had to make them smaller still to fit my smaller jaws properly, and that left me with these extra wide shoulders. And basically what I had done was flatten the bottom of the bowl more than I meant to, in a way that kind of hid from me as my eye would follow around the radius of the bowl. I kind of lost track that radius didn't really continue. And so here I was looking at it and thinking, I got plenty of wood. And besides, I was having fun, and the cuts were going nice. And of course, even if I had stopped 1 or 2 cuts earlier, it still would have been too thin along the bottom there to then later take off the tenon and reshape the bottom a little bit, as we'll be seeing in the last episode coming up next. As we've been talking about the demise of blank number 7, we've progressed pretty well into blank number 8, and still feeling pretty good about how things are going. Getting good clean cuts. Not a lot of tool marks. Just a nice fluid, bounder. A nice fluid arc to the cut. It gives you a nice rounded bottom. This is one of the oaks, and you can see I'm getting what I consider decent shavings off of there. Not big and long, the beautiful long shavings like you see in some of the videos, but probably the best looking shavings I've gotten off of the oak so far. Let's see, slowed down to real time here. Let's see what that's about. Must be something about to happen. I do find that, particularly after blank number 7, I stop the lathe a lot to kind of check in on the thickness. There are tools for doing that, calipers, metal calipers. One older guy in the club that I belong to has a handmade kind of caliper that's more for doing a twice turned bowl though, which I don't think we've talked about, but it's something that I'll be starting to do, which is when you get a piece of wet wood, green wood, it takes a long time to dry, and if you rough it out first down to somewhere in the neighborhood of about an inch, depends on what the diameter of the bowl is, but somewhere in the neighborhood of an inch thick around the lip, then you can really accelerate the time it takes to dry because you're removing a lot of the wood. It also tends to help with reducing the risk of cracking. Yeah, I remember why we slowed down here. So keep your eye on this bowl. You might notice it's starting to wobble a little bit. And that's because I did the exact same thing on the very next bowl. I told you wouldn't have to wait long. I'd forgotten it was coming up quite this quick, but yeah, 2 in a row. Exact same mistake. I shaved it right down to the chuck. Luckily it didn't catch metal, and notice that when this thing blows up, that tool barely moves. Something I learned a long time ago with using a table saw and other tools with my dad is when things go wrong, stand still for a second. Things tend to get worse if you respond too abruptly. You drop a piece of wood and you don't want it to drop onto the saw, and you reach for it to keep the wood from hitting the saw, and instead your hand hits the saw. So I've kind of developed look, the beauty of video. Put it in reverse, that bowl is perfect. But yeah, it's worth training yourself if you're new to woodworking in general, to not react too dramatically when something goes wrong. It's more likely to make things worse than better. Obviously exceptions. If you drop a tool and it's heading for your foot, you might want to move your foot. I saw a video or a photo, I guess, on one of the Facebook groups I belong to, where a guy had actually tried to prevent the tool that he just dropped from hitting nose down. He used his foot to sweep it sideways so that it wouldn't land on the nose and bung up the cutting edge. Only problem was he got his foot underneath it instead of sweeping it to the side, and he ended up with a U-shaped cut in the top of his foot. The funny part is that he was posting not to call out how ill-advised it was to use a body part to block a tool, but rather that he should have been wearing shoes in the shop. I think both of those are probably decent points. The Facebook groups, by the way, are worth calling out. There are 3 that I belong to. There are a few others, of course, but the biggest one and broadest is simply called Wood Turning, and it has quite a few members who are well-known turners like Cindy Drozda and Mike Mahoney. The other 2 are wood turning for beginners and wood turning newbies. Fairly self-explanatory there. They're for people who are just getting started and have a lot of questions to ask. And it occurs to me as I mention those that the odds are fairly high that if you've actually found these videos, you probably found them through one of those groups, assuming I get posted there. One of them at least. I don't think I'm allowed to post my own videos, but we'll see what happens when I do. Or maybe I'll get somebody else to post a link for me. So we are now approaching the end of the last episode, not the last episode in the series, but the last one where we're really covering new ground, a new type of cut. The final episode, as I think I said early on, is working on the bottom of the bowl, thinning a bit and removing or reshaping the foot and other things like that, none of which involve new cuts to speak of. But anyway, as we approach the end here, worth pointing out that I think that the approach that I took for this series of practice sessions of focusing on one operation and repeating it with a couple dozen bowls has worked out quite well for me. I think I probably learned each skill way faster than I would have if I had just done an equivalent number of bowls where I was stepping through each process, in series on that bowl. Because as I knew going in, this way I'm really practicing the same thing over and over and getting the refinement in the process without having forgotten what I learned the last time. So I highly recommend going about it this way. Line yourself up 20 or 30 blanks and just focus on doing the same thing over and over. I think it's a pretty effective approach. Of course, the part I don't recommend, as I said very early on, is using only videos to develop the skills in the first place. That getting yourself a mentor through a local club, ideally, or at the very least taking a lesson at Woodcraft or Rockler or someplace like that is by far the best way to learn. And I've yet to do that, but I sure plan to. The club I belong to has a number of extraordinarily skilled turners. One older gentleman in particular, every time we have a club meeting in person, it's been a few months since we did that with COVID, but he always has 8 or 10 items, all of them spectacular, and all that he's turned just in the last month. And I'm sure that's only a fraction of what he turns. But I understand he's happy to basically give lessons or tutor turners, and I guarantee I'll be signing up to get some of his time as soon as it's all safe to do that. Let's see, we're up to blank number 12 here. That's olive. And take a look at the grain here. I'm not sure how this one turns out, but the last bowl in the set, number 14, will be coming back to olive. And I think each time I stop it, you can see that there's some pretty grain cutting across the bottom of the bowl and kind of connecting the end grain on the two sides. And it's just about gone. And on a couple of these, I went too far. I had a particular shape or depth or whatever in mind, and I just kept carving to get the shape, but in the process I lost the grain. And so I really recommend that as you're working on a piece, that you pay attention to what it looks like and what's going to happen if you keep going. In this case, the interesting dark wavy grain was only for the heartwood, the center of the log. And as it got out into the, what's it called? Sapwood and the heartwood? Might have had it wrong. The sapwood is the outside and the heartwood is the inside. And anyway, the inner rings were the interesting part, and once I cut through them and got to the outer rings, you can see here there's nothing going across the center, and that really had made it an interesting piece. And we'll come back to this again, as I said, on Blink number 14, where I actually grab a couple of photos along the way and compare them. And in that case, I did end up actually stopping in a timely fashion and left some of that grain going across the bottom. But it's just one more thing to think about, is don't get too carried away with your own idea of what a bowl should be. And listen to the wood as you're working and adapt if it's going to make the piece more interesting. In this case, the answer would have been to stop going deeper on the inside, and then in the final work on the bottom to thin it out there to get down to a good consistent thickness. This is a point I wanted to call out, something that completely unrelated to turning. But if you happen to do videos, and particularly videos of turning, check out what's happening here with the shavings being shot straight at the camera. And this camera is one of my iPhones, and it turns out that the iPhone has the camera must have a static charge or something, because it sucks up dust, and it'll get coated in dust. And I don't know if you noticed when I first brought this up, but the camera was starting to get foggy, and this is something I had to fight throughout the process, was keeping an eye on that camera and occasionally wiping it off with my thumb, because it would get so coated that it was like, looking through fog. Same thing doesn't happen with the GoPro, so it's something about the camera on the. Another topic here that I meant to get to a minute ago. You may have noticed that I took the bottom bowl gouge out of the handle for a second, and then came back just a second later. Well, actually, that was a minute or so that I was away to sharpen the gouge. And the reason I bring that up, sharp tools are always key to doing good turning. Once the tool gets dull, you're having to use too much force, and it starts to hurt your technique, and it's just not getting a good result. And I found that even more so with the bottom bowl gouge than the 40/40 standard bowl gouge that I've done most of the work with. I don't know if it dulls faster or if you just notice it more, but man, repeatedly I found that I'd be going through the motions and just not getting results. I wasn't carving much wood off, and it occurred to me, I probably need to sharpen. And sure enough, man, come back with a sharp tool, and it's completely different experience. So again, no way to know with my limited experience whether the bottom bowl gouge is more prone to getting dull than a standard bowl gouge, but it sure was more apparent to me when it needed to be sharpened. I was able to probably go farther than I should have with the regular bowl gouge, but this one really starts to stall when it gets dull. While we're on the topic of sharpening, worth calling out, I mentioned at the beginning that the bevel for this bottom bowl gouge is 60 degrees. I have a single platform for sharpening, and it's a pain to adjust that and get it just right for one angle and then set it back to the other angle. Stuart talks about how he does that by he just keeps it at 40 and puts his finger underneath the back end of the bowl gouge, bottom bowl gouge, when he's sharpening it to get it up to about 60 degrees. That was a bit rough for my liking, and he's been doing it long enough. I'm sure he gets really good results, but you know, I'm new at this and wanted to get it right and not have that margin of error introduced. So what I did to save having to readjust the platform or the expense of buying a new platform, I made a wedge that sits on top of the platform and jacks up the back end by just what I want, 20 degrees. Now if I end up going to 50, 55 degrees, I'll need to make a new wedge for that purpose, but it took me probably 30 minutes at the table saw and the chop saw and whatever to make the two angled pieces and a little piece of plywood, 1/4 inch plywood across the top, to create the platform for it, and that's worked pretty well for me. Alright, we're getting near the end of the last blank here, and this is where I said I was going to call out the grain across the bottom, and how if I went too much deeper I was going to lose the grain connecting across the bottom. So let's pause here and let you hear my response as I get to see it kind of for the first time. That's pretty. Yeah, I agree with myself. It is pretty. I'm not going to stop here. I'm going to keep cutting, and at the end, when I decide I'm finally done, I'll show you a picture of just what we saw there and where it ended up, and let you decide whether I should have kept going. Of course, there's other considerations too. I was working to smooth out the transition from the side to the bottom, and get rid of tool marks and stuff like that. So, it wasn't like it was necessarily quite ready for me to stop entirely and leave it there. But back to the main point is just being conscious of the grain, and that just going a little bit further and you're getting out of the heartwood and into the sapwood, and that's going to completely change the character of the piece. You can see I'm stopping frequently to check both whether it's quite there yet, whether I've achieved the quality of finish that I want off the tool, and also whether I can afford to go any deeper without getting into getting through the heartwood. And most of these passes, you can see I'm barely taking any wood off, so very light cuts. And again, a sharp tool is essential for being able to take light, clean cuts like that. I honestly don't know which of these times is going to be the end. I guess we'll know when the photo pops up that I already inserted down there to show side by side. That's looking pretty good. If it were me, I'd stop there. Nope. It occurs to me that I misspoke a while back when I was talking about the way that the tool was jumping back to the left on me, and that I thought that was a type of a leverage catch. And at that point I talked about another kind of leverage catch just resulting from the tool being extended over the tool rest far enough that you start to lose control if you don't have a long enough handle to compensate. And I think I misspoke in referring to that as a leverage catch. Now, I suppose maybe it can result in the tool catching, but it's really just a problem of the handle being long enough, and the handle and the tool behind the tool rest being long enough to have control over it. And it's more of a problem with the bottom bowl gouge than with any other, because you're reaching farther into the bowl with it. You're almost always going deeper with the bottom bowl gouge than with the traditional 40-40. And the ratio that Stewart recommends is 5-to-1, that you have five times more length behind the tool rest as you have extended over the tool rest. We're not getting close to that here. I have a 24-inch handle on here, plus at least a foot of tool before the tool rest. So I have ample leverage in this particular case, but it's something to keep in mind with deeper bowls. And here we're going to show the side-by-side. The one on the left is from earlier when I think maybe I should have stopped, and the right is, we're now done. I'm not going to take any more cuts here. And I'd say that it's a toss-up. I mean, they're different. They're not, one isn't worse than the other. I didn't go far enough to really lose that stripe across the bottom, and in fact it ended up somehow having more color, a deeper yellow to it, which is, I think, interesting, more striking. Meanwhile, the one on the left has more grain extending across that stripe through the middle. So yeah, they're just different. Not one better than the other, but something to keep in mind as you're cutting. Just think about where you're at and whether you really want to go deeper. Well, that is all I have to say about the bottom bowl gouge. Hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time when we finish off the bottom and outside of the bowl. Cheers.